Where are the Democrats going with this? If Mondami is the face of the Democrats on the East Coast and Katie Porter is the face on the West Coast, I don't know if that's great politically for that. Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor in the Oval Office last week.
It appears the Democratic Party may be drifting towards socialism, and Bill Maher believes that direction could seriously damage the party's future. The outspoken comic delivered a blunt warning: embrace socialism, alienate mainstream voters, and risk losing in 2028. His remarks were sharp, direct, and impossible to ignore. If you're looking for unfiltered political analysis, this breakdown dives into his argument.
The party has a clear choice here, very clear. One wing is saying don't ever use the word socialist again, and one is saying,
I am a democratic socialist.
Clear, huh? So how do we decide who's right? Well, it turns out we don't really have to flip a coin. We have the evidence. In 2024, 13 Democrats won. In districts, Trump also won. All moderates. This isn't rocket science. All the left-leaning think tanks have done autopsies on 2024, and they all came up with the same message: move to the center. Even the New York Times, which did so much to promote woke politics, now says the partisans are wrong. Moving to the center is the way to win. And Democrats should recognize the party moved too far left on social issues after Obama left office.
Bill Maher doesn't hold back. He warns that if Democrats continue leaning towards socialism, they could unintentionally hand the Republican Party a major advantage. In his view, adopting labels and policies many Americans still see as polarizing would energize conservative voters, unify the GOP base, and strengthen Republican chances at the presidency. Rather than expanding their coalition, Maher argues Democrats could shrink it, giving Republicans a powerful campaign weapon. His advice is blunt but strategic: move back to the center. He believes the Democratic National Committee should focus on practical, bread-and-butter issues that resonate with moderates and independents instead of ideological purity tests. Winning elections, he says, isn't about satisfying the loudest online voices. It's about broad appeal. If Democrats want to compete effectively in 2028, moderation, not militancy, may be the smarter path.
The kids think that stuff that happened before their appearance on the planet didn't really happen, but it did. We've run this experiment many times, and the results are always obvious. Here's capitalist South Korea at night from space. Here's socialist North Korea. Yeah. In 1990, Venezuela was wealthier than Poland. But then Poland, finally free of Soviet-style economics, went all in on capitalism. And now their economy is as big as Japan. And people there have high wages, low inflation, cars, vacations, homes. Meanwhile, Venezuela traded capitalism for Hugo Chavez's socialism for the 21st century, which turned out to be like socialism in the last century, or any century.
Maher argues that socialism remains a political non-starter in the United States because many Americans are deeply skeptical of it. He suggests voters don't need a history lesson. They believe they've seen how sweeping socialist experiments unfolded elsewhere: economic stagnation, shortages, and government overreach. Whether those comparisons are fully fair or not, Maher insists perception carries weight. And in politics, perception often decides elections. He contends that voters grow uneasy when policies appear to centralize too much authority in government hands. After generations shaped by free market ideals and individual opportunity, many Americans remain cautious about dramatic ideological shifts. In a tight national race, even a small loss of moderates could cost Democrats the White House.
Turned one of Latin America's richest countries into one of its poorest. Low wages, high inflation, shortages, outages, 8 million people fleeing. If you think New York can somehow reinvent this wheel, you're in for a rude awakening. Zoran can't make your wishes come true. You're thinking of Zoltar.
Maher points to what he views as a real-world example emerging in New York, where some Democrats openly identify as democratic socialists, including Zoran Mamdani. For Maher, this isn't just a local development. It's a potential preview of what could unfold nationally if the party continues down that path. He sees the rise of such figures as energizing to activists, but potentially unsettling to moderate voters who often decide close elections. History, he argues, offers caution. Candidates who lean heavily into ideological branding sometimes struggle to maintain broad public confidence over time. Governance, not slogans, determines survival. If results fail to match promises, voters respond decisively at the ballot box.
Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor in the Oval Office last week. Bernie, AOC, Mamdani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're democratic socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people know that yet.
Maher argues this is where what he sees as an illusion begins. Many voters believe democratic socialist differs fundamentally from socialist, assuming the added word softens the ideology. Critics like Maher contend the distinction can feel largely cosmetic. In their view, expanded government control, aggressive redistribution, and a larger state role in the economy remain central principles. Supporters insist democratic socialism simply emphasizes achieving reforms through elections rather than authoritarian rule. However, Maher suggests that once policies are implemented, the practical outcomes may appear similar to traditional socialist frameworks. Branding may make an agenda more palatable at first, he says, but voters ultimately judge results, not terminology. If policies resemble what Americans already distrust, rebranding may not shield Democrats from electoral consequences.
I don't think people realize we already have a lot of socialism. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, food stamps, veterans benefits, Pell Grants, COVID-era payments, farm subsidies, disability payments, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, corporate bailouts, and the jobs program that is building weapons the Pentagon doesn't even want. All that is socialism, much of it appropriate to soften the edges of capitalism, but the DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy. Their platform, for example, calls for completely open borders. They're for what Biden was doing, but more. You think you're going to win an election on that?
Maher also highlights immigration as a significant political vulnerability. He notes that many voters cited concerns about border management under Joe Biden as a reason they lost confidence in Democratic leadership. For those voters, border security wasn't abstract. It represented competence and order. When people feel the system is out of control, Maher argues, they look for alternatives, even if they disagree with those alternatives on other matters. He worries that some democratic socialists continue to support policies voters have already rejected at the ballot box. In his view, that signals a party that hasn't fully absorbed past political consequences. Repeating the same strategy while expecting different results could backfire again in a closely divided nation.
Police or military in the streets, either MAGA's crypto crony capitalism or city-run grocery stores. No, I don't want that. I want a Democrat who reassures me if you like your Whole Foods, you can keep your Whole Foods. Governor-elect Spanberger once said about Biden's presidency that, quote, nobody elected him to be FDR. They elected him to be normal. Normal! You know, at this year's DSA convention, or as it's commonly known, Comic-Con, get this, you had to submit a photo of a negative COVID test to get in. In 2025. Yeah, no one wants to do that.
Maher frames his advice in simple terms: be normal. He argues Democrats don't need sweeping ideological revolutions, or culture war crusades to win in 2028. They need steadiness, pragmatism, and messaging grounded in everyday concerns. He has frequently criticized what he sees as extreme woke rhetoric, suggesting it alienates more voters than it motivates. Most Americans, he argues, want competence, stability, and leadership focused on kitchen table issues, jobs, inflation, safety, and opportunity. When political messaging feels disconnected from daily life, voters tune out or turn away. His point isn't to abandon core values, but to prioritize presentation and practicality. To him, moderation isn't weakness, it's strategy.
It seems to me that there are two pillars that this country is founded on. One is democracy, and one is capitalism, free markets. Rid of the other, right? The Republicans are not that, democracy is just not number one on their list. It just isn't. It isn't. It's behind Christianity and a few other things. And the Democrats, I mean, I read these, 74% are for democratic socialism. Only 16% favor capitalism. Is this going to be a country that I don't recognize in 5 to 10 years if we don't have these two pillars?
Maher has also expressed surprise at polling showing a growing openness to socialism among some Democrats. He considers that politically risky given how charged the term remains in American politics. Socialism, he argues, carries historical baggage tied to inefficiency, stagnation, and declining living standards in certain centralized systems abroad. Whether those comparisons are always precise or context-specific, he believes perception alone can sway elections. Many voters, he says, equate socialism with economic decline and limited opportunity. That perception could become a potent Republican campaign message. While Maher doesn't claim every progressive policy leads to collapse, he insists labels matter in competitive national races.
The Democrats going with this. If Mondami is the face of the Democrats on the East Coast and Katie Porter is the face on the West Coast, I don't know if that's great politically for that party.
Some critics share Maher's concern about the rise of progressive figures such as Zoran Mamdani and Katie Porter. They argue this trend may signal an ideological shift toward democratic socialism that risks alienating moderates and independents. Rather than broadening appeal, critics fear it could narrow the coalition and reinforce Republican attack lines. The concern isn't solely about individuals, but about the party's broader brand. When voters perceive movement away from pragmatism toward ideology, confidence can erode. Whether predictions of long-term decline prove accurate remains uncertain, but the debate reflects deeper tensions over identity and electability.
These Democratic Socialists at another of their conventions, they were told to make jazz hands instead of clapping, lest some delegates suffer sensory overload. And also, and I'm not joking, they were told not to be wearing, any aggressive scents.
Please don't go into that space with anything that's like an aggressive scent, for instance, right? Because that's going to be difficult for people.
Oh, for sake.
Maher has not hesitated to criticize what he sees as the Democratic Party's growing fixation on woke politics. In his view, it's more than cultural, it's electoral. When leaders appear focused on symbolic language battles and niche ideological debates instead of practical concerns, many Americans feel disconnected. Maher warns that pairing a socialist economic message with aggressive cultural progressivism can create a perception of extremism. Fair or not, he believes that image can be politically damaging. National elections are often decided in the middle, and drifting too far from mainstream sentiment risks shrinking a party's reach. His final warning is clear: moderation, pragmatism, and relatability, not ideological extremes, win elections. If Democrats want to remain competitive in 2028 and beyond, he argues they must reconnect with mainstream voters and everyday concerns. And that brings us to the end of today's video. If you enjoyed this breakdown, hit the like button and subscribe for more political analysis and commentary.